So today we're going to talk about the brand new Legion 5i, 5 Pro, and then of course the all new 7i Pro and 7 Pro. The difference between the 7 and the 7i, the 5 and the 5i is one comes with AMD, the other one comes with Intel. But they're not really changing the design a lot. Like, this is going to look a lot like the previous version. In fact, I have the 2022 model of the Legion 5i Pro right in front of me. And the big difference you notice right away is the lid design. On the previous model, you have these two angular cuts. On the new version, they're just keeping it flat. So it's going to look very simplified. On top of that, they're also introducing a brand new blue color. Now, this could go either way. Like, I don't think it's going to look okay. It's either going to look really good or super cheap. And it's hard to tell in these renders. It's going to be something that I get into the studio and see for myself, because blues are tricky, right? Like, blues could really look bad on a aluminum chassis. So it depends on the actual tone and color hue of the blue they're using. On top of that, the other little change they're making is the design of the grills. On the 2022 model, they're a little bit more circular with some rough cuts. On the new version, they're going to be more hexagonal. They're going to feel a bit more round. The port lineup is also pretty much identical with one slight change. So for example, on the right-hand side, you have your e-shutter, which obviously closes the webcam so no one can see you. You have your combo jack, and then of course a USB 3.2 Gen 1 port on the right-hand side. Then on the back, you have your power connector, and this laptop will either come with a 230 watt power brick or a 300 watt power brick. Two more USB 3.2 ports, HDMI 2.1. You have a Type-C port that supports USB power delivery, which can be charged up to 140 watts. This is kind of interesting because most of the other laptops I've talked about this week can only do up to 100 watts. It seems like Lenovo's pushing it a bit more. And of course, you get a full-size RJ45 jack. Now, the slight tweak to ports comes in on the left-hand side. With the old model, you have two Type-C ports, one of them being Thunderbolt 4. The Thunderbolt 4 is remaining there, and obviously it's probably going to be USB 4.0 for the AMD model, but this other Type-C port is being replaced with a regular USB-A port. Now, the other changes come down to the keyboard deck. It's going to have the exact same layout. It's still going to have a numeric touchpad. There's going to be 4 zones of RGB that you can change to whatever color you want, but they did change the color of the keys. Same keys, same travel distance of 1.5 millimeters, but they're now gonna be all black. So you're gonna have a two-tone finish to the actual deck. You still have your power button that has a light inside, which changes colors depending on which performance profile you have. If you do wanna take advantage of Lenovo's AI, all you have to do is leave it in intelligent mode. Touchpad, same position, it's gonna be glass, but the change comes down to the display options. It's still QHD. You still have a 1080p webcam at the top, but the difference is you have two QHD panels to choose from. One is slightly better than the other. There's a QHD Plus display that can go up to 300 nits, and there's a QHD Plus display that can go up to 500 nits and supports HDR. Now, the 7i and 7 Pro is gonna sport a very similar design, but the big differences come down to quality of life features. So, for example, you're gonna have a lot of RGB, per key RGB using their Spectrum technology. You're gonna have RGB under the laptop, a lot more customization in that front. Port lineup is gonna be identical, but with the display, you have the ability to spec it with mini LED, and that can go up to anywhere around 1100 nits of brightness. Now, you can get either laptop with an AMD processor or an Intel processor. With AMD, you can spec it with a Ryzen 5 7645HX. You can get it with a Ryzen 7 7745HX or a Ryzen 9 7845HX. With Intel, it's going to be your standard 13th gen processor, so the 13500, the 13700, the 13900, and they're all going to be HX. So this is like Intel's top of the line stuff. In the GPU department, you can get it with an RTX 3050, which will run at 95 watts, or an RTX 4050, 4060, or 4070, which will run at 140 watts. Now, if you go for the 7i or the 7 Pro, the 7 Pro, the AMD model, can only be spec'd with one CPU, the 7945HX, which is the most powerful Ryzen processor they're offering. With Intel, you still have access to all three different options, and you can only get the 7i or 7 Pro with an RTX 4080 or 4090, which means you get a higher TGP of 175 watts. But I think the big difference comes down to whether you want the beefier GPU. Obviously, the 7i and 7 Pro are going to be much more expensive because you're also paying for these extra features. On top of that, you're also getting access to a bigger battery with the 7 series, 99.99 watt hours, which is the legal limit of battery size if you're traveling on a plane compared to 80 watt hours in the Legion 5 Pro. You also get the option of choosing a 330 watt GAN adapter, so it's going to be a lot smaller than your traditional Lenovo adapter, which will obviously help with traveling. But if you want a vapor chamber, okay, you have to go with the 7i or the 7 Pro because those are the only two options that allow it. Just because it has that big 4090 and 4080 inside, you just get the better cooling to go along with it. So I don't know what performance is gonna be like, but these new AMD 7945HX processors look super interesting. They're running on a 4nm architecture. It's gonna be super efficient. Battery life should be fantastic on these laptops, but it's hard to say how it's gonna compare to Intel. I do know that Intel's obviously going to have faster single core clock speeds, so mainly important if you're doing any 1080p gaming. But one thing that I think AMD might do better this year is actually have better multi-core speeds. These 7945HX processors have 16 cores, but they're performance cores, whereas Intel is running 10 performance cores on their HX processors plus 16 efficiency cores. So it's gonna be very interesting on how these two laptops go head to head. Another little design benefit of going with the 7 series is that the display can go flat, or at least 180 degrees. This one can only go this far back, which is pretty standard for a gaming laptop, maybe not so important for most people. If you want the best of the best, you're gonna be going for the 7i and the 7 Pro. If you want a really good experience, better bang for your buck, and you're okay topping out at a 4070, then you're probably looking at the Legion 5i or 5 Pro. I'm gonna be reviewing both of these laptops, so make sure you're subscribed to see that. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll try to answer as many of them as soon as I get these laptops in. Availability is probably gonna be around March, or at least they'll start shipping in March, so stay tuned for that. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one.